She missed her last bus home and took shelter in an abandoned warehouse. There she found a terrified little girl shivering with fever and stayed with her through the freezing night. What she didn't know: the child belonged to the city's most dangerous mafia boss, and he was about to turn her world upside down. Emily Carter ran through the bitter November darkness, her thin canvas shoes soaked through with rain, the strap of her backpack torn since morning. Each gust of wind pierced through her cheap wool sweater like needles. Her hands were red and numb. She had seen the taillights of the last bus turn the corner just half a block away. It wasn't because she was late. She had gone back for the borrowed textbook on criminal psychology she couldn't afford to lose. Now her phone had died 3 blocks ago, and her bank account held only $63. Not enough for a ride. Not enough for a cheap motel room on the south side of the city. She knew she was standing in the old industrial district west of Chicago, where after midnight, the cafes that gleamed by day locked their doors. The streets emptied, and only the wind howled through rusted shutters. Every door was closed. Her roommate had bolted their apartment from the inside. No surprise. Not after that morning's argument about 2 months of unpaid rent. Walking home would take more than 4 hours, through streets where girls like her often became the names read out on the morning news. It wasn't safe. And then, as if conjured by some dark miracle, a warehouse appeared ahead. It crouched between 2 cracked red brick buildings, its sliding back door left slightly open, revealing a narrow tunnel of blackness. Emily had passed by this place hundreds of times on the bus, without ever noticing it. Now, it was her only refuge. She slipped inside, her breath instantly visible in the cold. The air smelled of rust, dust, and stale rainwater. Moonlight spilled through broken panes high above, casting uneven patches of silver across the concrete floor. She found a corner behind a stack of wooden crates, pulled her backpack close, wrapped her arms around her knees, and tried to make herself small. She told herself not to think about the statistics her professor had quoted in class about homeless women. Disappearances without explanation. Names forgotten over time. "I'm not homeless," she whispered. "Just stuck. Just for one night." But the wind seemed to have a personal grudge against warmth, slipping through every crack and seam. And then she heard it, a sound, faint and fragile, like a kitten trapped somewhere. Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Every true crime podcast she had ever listened to echoed in her mind. Don't investigate strange noises when you're alone. Don't. Stay put. But the sound came again, softer this time, like a muffled sob. So human. "Hello," she whispered, her voice trembling. No reply. She waited half a minute, then rose slowly. No flashlight, no phone, only the dim wash of moonlight. She stepped carefully, avoiding scraps of metal and splintered wood. Behind a few damp cardboard boxes, she saw her. A little girl, about 6 years old, curled up in the shadows. Her dark blue velvet dress was wrinkled and torn at the sleeve. No shoes, no socks. Her small body shivered violently. Fever. Emily realized. "Oh God," she breathed. The child's dark eyes flew open in panic. She pressed herself against the wall. "It's okay." Emily raised both hands, crouching down. "I won't hurt you. I promise." The girl said nothing, didn't cry, didn't move, just stared, wary, like someone who had long since learned what pain looked like before it arrived. "Are you lost?" Emily asked softly. Still no answer, only that piercing gaze. Emily glanced at the warehouse door, then back at the child. Instinct told her something was wrong. The expensive dress, the bare feet, the silence, they all pointed to a story far darker than she could yet imagine. "My name's Emily," she said gently. "I'm just a student. Got stuck here till morning. Seems like you did too." A small nod. Emily wasn't sure whether to feel relief or fear. She should call the police. But her phone was dead. She should leave. But what if the person who left this child barefoot came back? She couldn't leave her alone. "You're cold, aren't you?" Emily murmured, taking off her torn denim jacket and stepping closer. Slowly. The girl watched her like a cornered animal. But when Emily draped the jacket over her small shoulders, something in her eyes shifted. Not trust, but a flicker of safety. Emily sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "I'll stay here." "Okay, until morning." "You're not alone." The girl clutched the jacket silently. Emily drew her knees to her chest. The faint warmth of that fragile body beside her was the only thing that made her feel alive. And that cold night in that empty warehouse, in a sleepless city, was the night when both of their lives began to change, though Emily did not yet know it. Not yet. Her breath rose in thin clouds within the heavy damper. She tucked her hands deep into her sleeves, trying to hold on to whatever warmth remained, her eyes never leaving the little girl beneath her jacket. In the weak moonlight filtering through the shattered window, the child looked like a piece of porcelain left behind, delicate, breakable. Emily had never seen a child so silent. No tears. No words. Barely even movement. Those wide black eyes stayed fixed on her, guarded and still. The girl did not sleep, but neither did she resist. As if endurance itself had become her native language, Emily counted her heartbeats to stay calm. School had taught her about trauma responses, about the closed-off behaviors of children who had seen too much. But no textbook could prepare her for the reality of sitting beside one in the dark. In a warehouse colder than stone, she studied her quietly pale skin, cracked lips, bare feet bruised and purple beneath the hem of an elegant dress. Emily took a small scarf from her backpack, rolled it gently, and placed it on the ground between them. "You can use this as a pillow if you'd like," she said, leaning back against the wooden crate behind her. Arms folded for warmth. Time seemed to stop. For a moment, Emily wondered if she was dreaming, or if she had turned to stone, a fixture of this frozen place. Then, slowly, the little girl reached out, took the scarf, and laid her head upon it. She didn't look at Emily, but the act itself was enough. Emily stayed perfectly still, afraid any movement would break the fragile spell. Then, a whisper so soft she almost missed it. "Izzy." Emily turned, uncertain she'd heard right. The child faced her now, still wary, but her lips moved again. "My name is Izzy." Clearer this time. A lump rose in Emily's throat. She nodded, smiling faintly. "Hi, Izzy. I'm Emily." Silence settled once more. Izzy curled up, drawing the jacket tighter. Emily didn't press further. She knew to let the child lead, inch by inch. After a few quiet minutes, she rummaged through her backpack and found her last granola bar, the breakfast she had saved for class tomorrow. She held it out without speaking. Izzy looked at it, hesitated, then gave a small nod. Emily peeled it open, broke it in half, and handed the smaller piece to her. The child took it, hands trembling. No thank you, but no resistance either. A fragile bridge of trust formed in that exchange, a shared meal, a name, a silence no longer entirely empty. As Isa cheved slowly, Emily leaned her head against the wall, fighting the pull of exhaustion. Every sound in the night echoed like a whisper from another world. A tin can clattered somewhere, and Emily jolted. Izzy's eyes widened in terror. "It's okay," Emily murmured quickly. "I'm here." Isa didn't answer, but her tiny fingers found Emily's hand beneath the jacket. They were ice cold. Emily clasped them tightly, instinctively, as if she had known her all along. She began to hum a lullaby her grandmother used to sing whenever the power went out. Soft words about stars and a boat drifting toward a safe shore. Izzy closed her eyes. Not asleep, but yielding at last to a sliver of rest. Emily knew she couldn't sleep tonight. She had to stay awake, to keep them both warm. Yet in that moment, as a stranger's child held her hand in the dark, she felt something achingly real, something alive, and fragile beyond words. She didn't know where Izzy had come from, didn't know who her parents were, but one thing she knew for certain: she could not leave this child behind. Not tonight, not ever. Around 5:30 in the morning, the first light of dawn filtered through the shattered panes. tinting the cold gray walls with a faint silver hue. Like ash, Emily had been sitting that way all night, her back pressed against a wooden crate, her hands still wrapped around the tiny fingers of Izzy, who had fallen asleep in her lap. She could no longer remember how many lullabies she had sung, nor how many times her head had nearly dropped from exhaustion and the biting cold that had seeped deep into her skin. But she didn't dare to sleep. She couldn't. The child was too fragile, too breakable. If she let go, even for a moment, Emily feared Izzy might vanish like a dream that had never been real. The early wind swept through the gaps in the door, carrying the damp scent of morning and the distant hum of traffic from a city slowly waking up. Emily tried to pull the torn denim jacket tighter around their bodies, but her fingers were stiff, her lips dry, her head throbbed with hunger and cold. Yet she made no sound of complaint. As long as Izzy was still breathing steadily in her arms, nothing else mattered. Then an engine roared outside. Not one, but several. The sound was deep, mechanical, synchronized. Before Emily could react, the warehouse door burst open with a metallic crash, so sharp it might have been a gunshot. She instinctively clutched Izzy tighter. The little girl woke with a start, let out a soft cry, and shrank into herself. Her face ashen, blinding light flooded the room as flashlights cut through the darkness. Dark figures stormed in, men dressed in black, long leather coats, earpieces glinting under the beam, weapons drawn and ready. Emily couldn't count them. 6, 8, maybe 10, moving in perfect coordination. Wordless, efficient. Every gun was pointed at her. One of them barked a command, cold and sharp. Don't move. Emily couldn't have moved even if she wanted to. Her lungs locked. Her pulse stopped. Then another man entered unarmed, silent, and yet the entire space froze, as if the air itself recognized his authority. He wore a flawless black suit, a crisp white shirt without a wrinkle. His silver-streaked hair slicked neatly back. Each step of his polished shoes echoed with deliberate control. But it was his eyes that trapped her. Deep, sharp, carrying the stillness of death itself. Like a lake before a storm, his gaze swept across the room, over Emily, and stopped, not on her but on Izzy, trembling in her arms. The child looked up, tears spilling over. A soft sob caught in her throat, and in a broken whisper, she breathed one word, "Papa." The world seemed to hold its breath. Emily felt the sudden movement as Izzy wriggled free and ran toward him. He bent down, catching her effortlessly, instinctively, as though he had done it 1,000 times before. His arms enveloped her, one hand cradling the back of her head with a tenderness that didn't seem to belong to a man so fearsome. "My daughter," he murmured, disbelief and relief tangled in his voice. Then his eyes found Emily and lingered. The silence thickened, stretching time itself. A chill ran down Emily's spine, but she didn't flinch. I just found her here," she said, her voice raw from cold and fear. "She had a fever. I couldn't leave her." One of the armed men took a step forward, weapon still raised. But the man in the suit lifted a hand. "Stop. You stayed with her?" he asked, his tone low and deliberate, the kind of voice that had long been obeyed. Emily swallowed hard and nodded. All night, he looked at his daughter, then at her bare feet, the torn dress, and the cheap denim jacket clutched like a treasure. Something in his expression shifted, not emotion exactly, but judgment, decision. "Your name, Emily Carter." He repeated it slowly, as if engraving it into his mind. "Emily Carter," he said again. "You saved my daughter. You're coming with us." What Emily blinked. "I need to go home. I have class this morning." No," he interrupted, not loudly, but with a certainty that left no room for refusal. "This is not a request." And before Emily could grasp what was truly happening, she was surrounded, escorted out. The world she had barely managed to hold together through one long night unraveled once more. But this time, it wasn't because of hunger, or cold, or despair. It was because she had just stepped into the orbit of a man whose name alone could silence those who carried guns. Vincent Moreau. Emily had never sat in a car like this before. In truth, she had never even touched one. The seats were real leather, the back warm, the glass so thick that the outside world was nothing but a silent blur. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne, the kind she'd only ever seen advertised in glossy magazines at the bookstore. She sat upright, her hands rigid on her knees, trying not to stare like a child lost in a castle. Beside her, Izzy sat quietly, wrapped in a soft beige blanket, her head resting against Emily's shoulder. Her eyes were still wide, but the panic had faded. Across from them sat Vincent Moreau, the man whose name Emily had heard in lectures on organized crime, but had never imagined meeting in person. He hadn't spoken a single word since they entered the car. His face was carved from marble, expressionless, though his eyes occasionally flicked toward Izzy with a look that was equal parts relief and tightly caged fury. Emily couldn't tell who that anger was for himself. Whoever had hurt his daughter, or perhaps the world itself. Through the tinted window, the scenery shifted from the ruins of the industrial district to clean, cobbled streets lined with trees and soft amber lamps. Eventually, the car turned onto a private incline. Iron gates opened automatically, flanked by tall fences and cameras that tracked every angle. Emily drew in a shaky breath as the mansion came into view beyond the trees. It wasn't merely a large house, it was an estate. Like something lifted straight from Europe. Gray stone walls, tall windows, black wrought iron balconies, and statues placed with surgical precision across the manicured gardens. She felt as though she were being ushered into another world, one part fairy tale, one part danger. The car stopped. The door opened. A woman in a white coat rushed forward to take Izzy from Vincent's arms. But the girl flinched, her eyes welling with tears, her head whipping back toward Emily. "It's okay, sweetheart," Emily whispered softly. Stepping out beside her, Izzy clung to her hand. The woman hesitated, then turned to Vincent for instruction. He gave a single nod. "She comes too." Simple, final, one sentence. And the world obeyed. Emily followed them inside, her footsteps echoing against the marble floors of a vast, silent hall. The ceiling soared above them, a crystal chandelier scattering light across walls of pale stone. Every sound was too sharp, every movement too cautious. Servants appeared and disappeared like shadows, trained to exist without drawing attention. No one spoke to her. No one asked who she was. They didn't need to. Izzy's hand gripping her arm said enough. Vincent led them down a long corridor, lined with dark wood and portraits that seemed to watch as they passed faces of power, legacy, and cold inheritance. He opened a door to a smaller, warmer room. A fireplace glowed faintly. The chairs were velvet, the colors deep and muted. Emily sat down, her legs trembling, aware of the mud on her shoes, the tangles in her hair, the way everything about her screamed out of place. Vincent stood before her, his gaze unreadable. "You saved my daughter," he said at last. "I don't yet know how to thank you." Emily began to shake her head, but he raised a hand. "I'm not saying that out of courtesy. I want to know why." She looked up and met his eyes. Because she was cold. She was sick. "I couldn't walk away." He nodded once, briefly. His expression softened barely, but then returned to stone. "You'll stay here for a few days, until we understand what happened. I have classes. I have work. The raised hand. Everything will be taken care of. Phone. Communication later. For now, my daughter's safety comes first." And she, he glanced at Izzy, now, asleep in Emily's arms, her lips slightly parted, her small hand clutching Emily's shirt as if it were a lifeline. "She won't let you go." Emily swallowed hard. Just a few days. But even as he said it, she felt the weight of something unspoken. Deep down, she knew the moment she crossed that threshold. Nothing about this house or her life would ever be just a few days. Emily woke in a room she didn't recognize, bathed in soft, golden light. A silk blanket as light as air wrapped around her body, carrying with it the faint scent of lavender candles lingering from the night before. It took her a few seconds to remember where she was, why she was here, and why her throat felt so dry. She turned her head toward the armchair beside the bed. The cushion still held a faint impression, as if someone had sat there through the night. Izzy was gone. Panic rose faster than reason. Emily threw the blanket aside and stood up. The door opened quietly as though someone had been waiting for her. An older woman stood there, her expression calm, her gray hair neatly pinned into a bun. Dressed in a crisp black uniform with a white collar, she bowed slightly. "Miss Emily." "Mr. Moreau is waiting for you. Miss Izzy is with the doctor. She's all right." Emily nodded her thanks. Though her voice caught in her throat, she still felt strange in the clean clothes they had left for her, a soft pair of jeans and a cream cashmere sweater. Both a little loose but impossibly fine. The tags were from brands she had only ever seen in luxury store windows. The woman led her down another corridor, its walls lined with dark oil paintings and black and white portraits of men in three-piece suits, their eyes cold and unreadable. Emily wondered how many generations had lived in this house, and how many secrets lay buried beneath its polished marble floors. They entered a large room with wide glass doors that opened onto the back garden, where winter roses had been pruned with almost surgical precision. A mahogany desk stood near the fireplace, where a steady flame crackled softly. Vincent Moreau stood beside it, his back turned, a white shirt with rolled sleeves. Notier, a steaming espresso cup in his hand. Emily froze on the threshold. When he turned, she saw clearly, for the first time, the face of the man whose name she had heard whispered in her criminology lectures. It was a face made for authority strong, deliberate, shaped by decisions that had divided life and death. Yet behind that cold restraint, she sensed something else. Weariness, perhaps, or grief. "Please, sit," he said, his voice low and precise. Formal, but not unfriendly. Emily stepped forward and took the seat across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Vincent set his cup down, then sat opposite to her. "Did she say anything to you?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "Only her name. Izzy. Nothing more. But she held my hand all night." For the briefest second, his face softened, disbelief flickering behind his eyes. "You're the first person she's allowed to touch her since she went missing," he said quietly. He looked down at his hands, broad, veined, powerful hands that had likely built and destroyed empires. "It's been 4 months. Not a word. Not a hug. She won't even look at me." Emily said nothing. She simply listened. Vincent raised his gaze, steady and searching. "What did you do?" "Nothing." Emily answered honestly. "I was just there." She was cold. She was afraid. "I couldn't walk away." He nodded slowly, silence stretching between them. "I don't make a habit of owing anyone anything," he said after a moment. "But this is different." The air in the room seemed to tighten. Emily swallowed. "I don't want anything," she said softly. "I just want Izzy to be safe, and you will make sure she is." Vincent replied without hesitation. "I want you to stay with her for as long as it takes." Emily's eyes widened. I'm a student. I have classes. A job. Everything will be arranged." He interrupted. "Generous pay. Your own room. Security. But most importantly, my daughter needs you." In his gaze, Emily saw something unguarded. Not the authority of a man used to commanding obedience, but the plea of a father trying to reclaim something precious he had nearly lost. "Just a few days," she murmured, almost to herself. Vincent didn't answer. Instead, he opened a drawer, pulled out a photograph, and placed it on the desk between them. It was a picture of Izzy in a white dress, standing in a garden full of flowers, smiling a smile Emily had never seen in person. "I lost my wife," he said quietly. "I can't lose my daughter too." And in that moment, Emily understood that this invitation was not a request. It was a choice she had no power to refuse. From that day on, Izzy never left her side. Wherever Emily went, the little girl followed, clutching the hem of her sweater as if it were a lifeline. When the staff brought meals into the room, Izzy hid behind her. When the doctor tried to take her temperature, she buried her face in Emily's chest, her small fingers fisting the fabric tight. Every time a stranger entered, whether it was a kind-faced maid or a nurse holding a toy, Izzy would shrink, her shoulders trembling as if bracing for punishment. Emily recognized it instantly. This wasn't simple fear. It was trauma etched deep into her being, the kind that only forms after something has been broken too many times. A child of 6 should not know such reflexes, should not know silence that heavy. Emily didn't press her. She didn't ask questions. She simply stayed. Patient, gentle. She told old fairy tales, hummed lullabies her grandmother used to sing. Each night, she placed a brown teddy bear beside Izzy's pillow and made sure the child's hand could reach her old denim jacket if she woke in the dark. The first day passed in silence. The second, Izzy began to lift her head whenever Emily called her name. The third, she nodded when asked if she wanted water or milk. Tiny Festuris, fragile as the ripple of wind across a still pond, but they meant everything. They meant she was listening, that somewhere beneath the silence, her small heart was still beating, still reaching for the light. On the 4th evening, as the sun faded over the rose garden, Emily sat with Izzy on the swing in the backyard. She didn't speak. She just pushed gently with her foot, letting the creak of the chain and the chime of the wind fill the space between them. Then a small sound broke the quiet. Emily tilted her head, unsure. What was that? Izzy, she asked softly, not wanting to startle her. Izzy met her eyes. The darkness in them had softened, a faint shimmer of light returning. The cat, she whispered, barely audible. Emily held her breath. What cat? Sweetheart, in the yard, a black one, Izzy said, her lips trembling but her voice clearer. It looked at me. It wasn't afraid. Emily smiled faintly. Maybe it saw that you're not so scary. Izzy shook her head. No. It knew I was scared, but it came anyway. Emily's chest tightened. She lowered herself to eye level. Like I did. There was a pause. Then Izzy nodded. Slowly, Emily extended her hand, not to touch, only to offer. Izzy reached out and brushed her fingertips. A small, delicate contact. Yet it carried the weight of something sacred. Do you like to draw? Emily asked. Izzy nodded. I'll bring you paper and crayons tomorrow. Okay, green ones. Izzy whispered. Your favorite color. My mom's. The girl said. The first time she had mentioned her mother, Emily didn't speak. She simply held Izzy's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. A quiet understanding passed between them. Izzy rested her head on Emily's shoulder. Unprompted this time. Don't go, she murmured. Stay. Emily's throat tightened. I'm here, she whispered back. As long as you need me. I'm here. Ija exhaled. A tiny sigh that sounded like release. Emily knew the moment was fragile. But it was a beginning, a crack in the ice, a sliver of light finding its way in. Izzy had begun to open. And Emily, somewhere along the way, had begun to belong, not out of pity, but from something deeper, an unspoken recognition, as if two lost souls had finally found each other in a world too cold to stand alone. Morning in the mansion carried an unusual stillness, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, afraid to disturb the fragile peace that had just begun to take shape. Winter sunlight slipped through the curtains, tracing soft golden lines across the polished wooden floor. Emily sat in the small art room that one of the maids had prepared for Izzy. A green crayon, the child's favorite, resting in her hand as she drew a simple row of trees on a blank page. Across from her, Izzy bent over her paper, carefully coloring the black cat she said she had seen in the garden. 4 days ago, Izzy had been a block of silence, no reaction, no voice, no spark. But today, she had whispered a few words, leaned her head on Emily's shoulder, and smiled when Emily added a red bow to the cat's neck. Watching the little girl's small hand fumble with the crayons, Emily felt something stir quietly inside her. Something she couldn't yet name, but it pressed against her chest each time Izzy whispered, "Don't go." Each time those dark eyes searched for her across the room. At first, Emily thought she stayed out of pity, out of compassion for a frightened, fragile child, lost in a world too large and too cruel. But now, she wasn't sure anymore. Each morning when she woke in her quiet room, it no longer felt strange. She had grown used to the soft footsteps in the hallway, the faint smell of toasted bread drifting from the kitchen, the silent nod of Marcus, the towering bodyguard who appeared like clockwork every day. She had grown used to Izzy's hand searching for her in sleep, to the child's light laughter when Emily meowed like a cat or spun a story about a dragon who planted flowers. What unsettled Emily most wasn't that she felt comfortable living in the home of a mafia king, it was that she was beginning to feel like she belonged there. For the first time in years, she didn't wake with anxiety gnawing at her chest. She didn't have to wonder if she could afford tuition tomorrow, or if she'd have enough to eat next week. She didn't have to race between classes, rush to her part-time job at the bookstore, or come home to her roommate's complaints about unpaid bills. Here, time felt suspended. The endless scramble of survival had stopped. And yet, peace was never complete. Every time Vincent appeared, the air shifted. He always entered with 1 or 2 guards, spoke little, and carried the gravity of someone who had long commanded silence. But he always paused to look at Izzy just for a moment, and when his gaze turned to Emily, it carried gratitude, intertwined with caution. She knew she was standing inside a dangerous world, that the marble halls and heavy doors concealed things far darker than they appeared. Yet within this house with its crayons, soft lullabies, and midnight whispers there was a rare corner of purity. Emily had once thought herself strong enough to separate reason from emotion, but now, every time Izzy's hand brushed hers, every time the little girl murmured Miss Emily, something inside her defenses cracked a little more. She was no longer just the caretaker. She was changing quietly, irrevocably, and she knew that if she ever had to leave, to step out of Izzy's life, her heart would not emerge whole. Somehow, this child had reached the softest part of her, the place she had spent years protecting, and she wasn't sure she could bear it if Izzy ever whispered again, "Don't go." That afternoon, while Emily and Izzy were walking through the garden behind the mansion, one of the bodyguards appeared at the gravel path, his expression more tense than usual. He bent to whisper something to Marcus, who shadowed them wherever they went. Moments later, Marcus approached Emily, his calm demeanor replaced by alertness. "Someone's here to see you," he said, his voice low. "The police." Emily stopped, her hand still clasped Izzy's. The little girl looked up, confusion flickering in her eyes. "I'll be right back," Emily said softly, crouching to whisper in Izzy's ear. "Ask Marcus to help you look after the black cat." "Okay," Izzy nodded, squeezed her hand one last time, then let go. Emily followed Marcus back into the house. They led her to a small sitting room near the main hall, where sunlight streamed through a skylight onto a polished walnut table draped in a white cloth. A woman, perhaps in her early 50s, sat waiting poised, sharp-featured, with eyes that seemed to see straight through whoever stood before her. She wore a light brown trench coat and a gray-blue silk scarf. On the table beside her rested a thin folder and an untouched cup of coffee. "Emily Carter," she said, her tone firm but not unfriendly. "I'm Inspector Lauren Price, Chicago Police Department." Emily nodded, her heartbeat quickening. "How can I help you?" Lauren gestured for Marcus to step outside, then motioned for Emily to sit. Once the door closed, she opened the folder, flipped through a few pages, and looked directly at her. "How long have you been staying here?" "Almost a week," Emily said cautiously. "I'm just helping take care of Mr. Ree, Moreau's daughter. She's been traumatized since the incident." "I know," Lauren replied quickly. "The little girl was found in an abandoned warehouse." "Correct, alone, with a fever, terrified, and you stayed with her through the night." "Yes," Emily answered. "And now you're living under Vincent Moreau's protection." There was something in Lauren's tone, measured but edged, that made Emily feel accused without a single harsh word being spoken. She nodded. "I just want to help her." Lauren leaned back, eyes still locked on Emily. "I believe that. But do you know who Vincent Moreau really is?" "I know what people say," Emily replied quietly. "But I only know one thing for certain. He's Izzy's father. And he loves her. He's also one of the most dangerous organized crime figures in the Midwest," Lauren said, her voice devoid of emotion. "We've been tracking him for nearly 5 years. Money laundering, witness intimidation, possibly murder. But no one's ever testified. Everyone who tried either disappeared or changed their story." Emily's fingers tightened on her lap. She said nothing. Lauren tilted her head, her tone softening, but her gaze sharpening. "We need someone on the inside. Someone trustworthy. Someone like you." The air thickened. Emily exhaled slowly. "You're asking me to be an informant. I'm asking you to help us bring a dangerous man into the light," Lauren said. "In return, we'll protect you. And the child. Izzy doesn't need the police," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. "She needs peace. She needs to heal. But she's living in the center of a criminal empire," Lauren replied firmly. "And you're standing right at the heart of it. You can't pretend that what's happening around you is normal." Emily felt the floor tilt beneath her. Everything that had begun to feel stable now seemed terrifyingly fragile. Lauren slid a small white card across the table. "Think about it. Call me when you're ready to do the right thing. You could change everything." Emily said nothing. She stared at the business card, the name Lauren Price printed above a string of numbers, then nodded faintly. A gesture of courtesy more than agreement. Lauren stood, adjusting her scarf, her eyes still fixed on Emily. "We'll see each other again." Then she left, the door closing softly behind her, leaving Emily alone in the silent room. Her hand still rested on the card, and in her chest, a wave began to rise, uncertain, unstoppable, carrying her toward a future she could neither predict nor resist. Emily remained in the sitting room long after Lauren had gone. The business card lay still in her palm, light yet heavy, like a key to a door she never wished to open. From somewhere beyond the hall came the faint sound of Izzy's laughter in the garden, the echo of footsteps on marble, the steady tick of a distant clock. All those sounds seemed to drift away, growing thin and unreal, as if the world around her were fading until only one question remained. Echoing through her chest, could she betray the man who had saved her life and the child she had come to love as her own in just a handful of days? Marcus found her in the hallway on her way back to Izzy. His expression suggested he already knew. "Mr. Moreau would like to see you," he said, his voice unreadable. Emily followed him without a word, her stomach tightening with every step. Vincent's study occupied the upper floor, facing south toward the garden. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, brushing pale gold across the dark wooden walls. When she entered, he stood by the window, hands in his pockets, his figure solitary, carved in shadow like a statue in too large a kingdom. "I heard Lauren Price came by," Vincent said before she could speak. Emily stood still. "What did she tell you?" "She said I could help bring you down," Emily answered truthfully. He turned. There was no anger in his eyes, no surprise, only a deep exhaustion she hadn't seen before. "And what do you think I don't know?" Emily said, her voice catching. "I'm not a cop. I'm not a criminal. I'm just someone who got caught in the middle of all this." Vincent moved toward the desk, his fingers tracing the edge of the glass surface. "Lauren Price is a seasoned predator. She knows exactly where people are weak, and she presses there." "And where's my weakness?" Emily asked, her tone steady, though her pulse was not. "He met her Chaza. Izzy." Her heart tightened. "And what about you? Are you using that too?" He was silent for a long moment, then shook his head. "No. I'm asking you because of it. Because I know you love her. And she loves you. So I won't force you. If you decide to leave, I'll let you go. I'll have you escorted out safely. No threats. No coercion. Emily looked at him, the most powerful man she had ever met, standing there stripped of all armor. Weary and human. Why do you trust me like this? Because I saw you holding my daughter through the night in that freezing warehouse. He said softly. You were terrified. Shaking, but you didn't run. And I don't believe someone like that would betray for promises of protection or a paycheck. Emily stepped forward, lowering herself into the chair opposite his desk. Her hands twined together. What if I tell you I need time? Vincent nodded. You have time, but not too much. She won't wait forever. And I don't want you ending up as another person she uses and discards. Emily drew a long breath. She said if I give her information, she'll make sure I get custody of Izzy if you're arrested. The words cut like glass. Vincent froze. His dark eyes narrowed briefly before he turned to look out the window, where Izzy played with one of the nannies in the garden. You'd be a good mother, he murmured. I know that. That's not what I wanted to hear. Emily whispered. I want to know what you think. He exhaled slowly. I think, if this ends with me behind bars but my daughter safe, I can live with that. And if I'm the one who puts you there for the first time, she saw something close to sorrow flicker in his eyes, then I'll still be grateful you took care of Izzy, no matter what happens. Emily couldn't recall how she left the study. She only knew that once the door closed behind her, her heart carried twice its weight, half for the little girl who curled against her at night, half for the unbearable knowledge that she stood at a crossroads where every path led to loss. After that conversation, Emily could no longer see the Moreau mansion the same way. The silent corridors felt too silent now. The polite glances from the staff no longer seemed courteous, but watchful. She began to notice the half-finished conversations that stopped when she entered, the phone calls Vincent took before vanishing for hours, and the way Marcus appeared more often near Izzy, as if guarding her from something unseen. She didn't know what had shifted, only that something had. She felt as if she were walking through a beautiful dream she knew would end the moment she tried to hold on to it. That night, after tucking Izzy into bed, Emily sat alone by her window. The distant streetlights shimmered faintly on the surface of her half-empty glass of water. Outside, the mansion looked as serene as ever, but something in the air kept her awake. She checked her phone. No messages. No missed calls. No word from Lauren Price since that day. Yet the silence itself had become ominous, heavy enough to make her skin crawl. The next morning, Vincent wasn't at breakfast. Neither was Marcus. Only Helena, the longtime housekeeper, stood waiting, her expression tighter than usual. Mr. Moreau left early, she said simply when Emily asked. Where to private business? No one said more. Emily nodded, but unease bloomed in her chest. After breakfast, she decided to wander. Not from curiosity, but from a gnawing fear that she was living inside a gilded cage whose walls were lined with kindness on the outside and secrets within. She followed the eastern corridor, the one she had never been invited to explore. Whenever she had asked, Helena or Marcus would dismiss it vaguely. That's the master's private wing. Today, no one stopped her. The door was unlocked. Emily pushed it open. The room beyond was paneled in dark wood, the air dim and still. Maps covered the walls pinned with strings. Photographs, satellite images, names and faces marked in red ink. This was not the office of a father. It was the nerve center of a man commanding a criminal empire. On the desk lay files on other mafia families. One name, Kozlov, was circled heavily, surrounded by notes, weapon routes, and coded messages. Emily's head swam. She staggered back, but then her eyes caught a folder stamped with her own name, Emily Dawson. Inside were pages of personal data, her former address, bank statements, photos of her on campus, her work schedule at the bookstore. Her breath caught. He had known about her long before the night in the warehouse. What did that mean? Had their meeting been an accident at all, or had she been chosen heart-pounding? Emily turned and fled the room, her thoughts scattering like broken glass. When she reached her own quarters, Izzy sat on the floor, coloring. Maya, the girl called softly, using the nickname Emily had taught her the first day. I drew the bunny. The one I saw in the garden yesterday. Emily knelt beside her, forcing a smile as she brushed a strand of hair from Izzy's face. That's lovely, sweetheart. But when she looked at the drawing, she saw two figures, a small rabbit and a larger one standing beside it, their paws touching beneath a gray, clouded sky. Emily's chest tightened. She knew she had to confront Vincent. She needed the truth, but deep inside, she feared that once she asked, there would be no going back. That the warmth she and Izzy had built, the fragile illusion of safety, would shatter the moment the truth surfaced. And worse still, she feared what she could no longer deny. She wasn't standing outside Vincent's world anymore. She was in it now, caught between power and secrecy, love and betrayal, in a place where no one walked away unscathed. Vincent returned close to midnight, his footsteps heavy, his eyes shadowed as though he had just come back from a place where light did not exist. Emily waited for him in the small library, the room Izzy had lovingly named the quiet room. Lined from floor to ceiling with shelves of old books, she could no longer bear the silence, could no longer live behind polite smiles and locked doors without knowing what truths hid within them. When Vincent entered, she rose immediately, meeting him head-on, her voice steady but her heart trembling. I saw the room, she said. The files, the maps, and my name. Vincent didn't flinch. He only nodded, set his gloves on a chair, and walked closer, not like a man caught in a lie, but like someone finally ready to confess what had weighed on him for far too long. I knew one day you would find it, he said quietly. And when that day came, I only hoped you'd ask me before imagining the worst. Emily's hands tightened. Her voice came out hoarse. Then tell me, all of it, about the little girl, about why I was chosen. Vincent sat down by the fireplace. The flickering light hollowed his face, stripping away the aura of a crime lord and leaving only a man worn thin by loss. 10 years ago, he began, I met Madeline, a woman unlike anyone in my world. She was the light in a place built on shadows, the one thing that made me believe I could still make amends. We married in secret, lived apart from everything I'd ever built. Then Izzy was born. I promised Madeline I would leave it all behind: power, networks, the entire empire. And I tried. I sold off outposts, cut ties with allied families, moved Izzy out of the city. But I was too slow. The car crash was staged. I watched her die right in front of me. He paused. His fingers trembled slightly, but the fury behind his eyes had not faded. Izzy survived with minor injuries. That didn't matter. What mattered was that I broke my promise. I didn't save the woman I loved. Emily sat down across from him, her pulse hammering in her throat. And me, Vincent looked up. I didn't seek you out. When Izzy was taken, every camera near that warehouse showed who went in and out. I didn't have the luxury of acting like a normal man. I needed to know who was a threat and who wasn't. I had you investigated. I found out you were just a student trying to survive. No family, no money, but you had something no one in my world possessed anymore. A heart. He leaned forward, his tone softening. Izzy saw it first. When you said you'd stay with her, you didn't say it out of duty. You said it out of love, pure instinct. Emily's throat tightened. I thought I stumbled into all this by accident, but I was part of something bigger than I could ever understand. Vincent shook his head gently. Not a part. The piece that's been keeping everything from falling apart. He rose, turned toward the window, and looked out into the dark garden. I've done terrible things in the name of protection. But you made her laugh again. You brought her voice back. You are the apology I could never give to Madeline. The second chance I never thought I deserved. Emily stepped closer, her voice unsteady. I don't know how far I can go. I don't know if I'm strong enough to stay. Vincent turned, his eyes soft for the first time. I don't need you to be strong. I need you to be real. Izzy needs you to be real. The rest I'll carry. In that moment, the man before her was no longer the feared architect of an underworld. He was simply a father, standing at the edge of redemption, holding out a hand toward a fragile hope, and Emily understood she was no longer outside the story. The next morning unfolded beneath a tension that hummed beneath the surface. Emily woke early, haunted by the conversation from the night before. She spoke to no one about it, not out of fear, but because the weight of it hadn't yet found words. Izzy, perceptive as always, sensed the unease. She clung to Emily's hand through breakfast, her wide eyes following every shift in Emily's face, as if afraid that, once again, an adult she loved would vanish without warning. When Vincent entered the dining room, the air shifted immediately. He didn't greet anyone. He didn't sit. He handed Marcus a thick envelope and gave a small nod. Marcus left at once, swift, efficient, mechanical. Emily stood and met Vincent's gaze. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. His eyes told her enough. Something was coming. He motioned for her to follow. They walked back to the library, the same place they had spoken the night before. This time, he shut the door and drew the curtains, the room dimming into secrecy. "There's something you need to know," he said, his tone low but urgent, "and I don't have time to ease into it. Tonight, the mansion might be attacked." Emily froze. Her heart thudded once. Hard. "Attacked by who? How do you know?" Vincent opened a drawer and pulled out a crumpled file. Inside were satellite photos, field reports, and a detailed map. The Marino family, one of Kozlov's last loyal branches. They know Izzy is alive, and they know you're here. To them, you're the weak link. Emily clenched her fists. "They want to take me," he nodded, "or kill you to break me." He paused, then looked at her with unflinching clarity. "I won't let that happen. But you need to listen carefully." From another drawer, he drew a small silver keycard. "This opens the safe room behind the bookshelf in the study. It's bulletproof and self-sustaining for 48 hours. Emily's fingers trembled as she took it. "What about Izzy? You'll take her there if there's an alarm." "I won't be inside. I'll be out there." "No," Emily said instantly. "I can't hide while you fight. We can run. There has to be another way." Vincent shook his head, his voice quiet but absolute. "If I run, they'll never stop. If I stand and hurt them, they'll hesitate. This is the last fight I can choose to protect my daughter. And to protect you." Emily looked at him for a long moment. In his face she saw not the strategist or the sinner, but a father fully aware he might not live through the night, and choosing to stay anyway. "What about Marcus?" The guards all informed. "The east windows are reinforced. The underground exit still works. But if all else fails, the safe room is your only chance." He pulled out a small phone. "Use this only if it's desperate. One button, it reaches me directly." Emily's hands felt cold around it. "And if I can't call in time," Vincent stepped closer, his hand steady on her shoulder. "You will, because you're stronger than you think." He held her gaze. "Emily, you can save Izzy. If I fall, you're all she'll have left." A chill ran through her. She had never wanted to be responsible for another life, much less a child's quote, but now there was no one else. In that instant, she understood the lost student who once drifted through a city of strangers had become the anchor of a child without a mother, and the last hope of a man trying to atone for the wreckage of his past. Emily gripped the keycard and the phone. "I'll protect her," she said quietly. "No matter what." Vincent gave a single nod, then turned toward the door, his tall frame fading into the shadows beyond. Alone in the silence, Emily sat motionless, her heart crowded with too many emotions to name. She knew the night ahead would change everything, and there would be no turning back. The first gunshot shattered the night at 2:15 in the morning, tearing through the silence like a fist striking the heart of Emily. She shot up from bed in an instant, no questions, no hesitation. Every nerve in her body knew they were here. She ran straight into the next room, where Izzy still slept soundly, her breathing soft and even. The little girl hadn't heard the first shot, but seconds later, the booming explosions grew louder, closer, shaking the entire mansion. Emily lunged forward, scooping Izzy into her arms. There was no time to soothe or explain. Her voice came out in a trembling whisper against the child's ear. "We have to go now. Sweetheart, it's okay. I'm here." Izzy rubbed her eyes, dazed and frightened. But when she saw Emily's face, she didn't ask a single question. She only nodded and wrapped her arms around Emily's neck, barefoot. Emily ran down the corridor, her feet slapping against the cold marble floor as the alarm screamed through the halls, a shrill, unending cry that turned the mansion into a nightmare. From somewhere far off came the clash of voices, glass shattering, gunfire cracking like thunder, shouts of, "Hold your positions," and West Wing is breached. She knew time was running out. Vincent's words echoed in her mind. The safe room, behind the bookshelf in the small library. The silver access card burned cold in her hand as she clutched it tight, crossing the grand staircase. She saw the front door blown open. A body lay sprawled across the tiles, one of the guards, blood pooled beneath him. Dark against the stone, Emily turned her head, shielding Izzy's face. But the child had already seen. She buried her face in Emily's shoulder, her tiny frame trembling uncontrollably. Emily refused to cry. There was no space for panic, no time for fear. Every heartbeat was a drum of survival. She sprinted through the hall, breath ragged, until the library came into view. She pushed open the heavy door, rushing to the massive wall of books. Her pulse spiked when she saw nothing resembling a handle or panel. Her mind screamed a single word: steady, feeling along the edges. Her fingers brushed against a thin, metallic seam. She pressed the keycard. A soft click. The shelf shifted. A door appeared. She yanked it open. Inside was a small room lined with reinforced metal, lit by a dim golden glow. There was a narrow bunk bed, a control console, shelves of supplies, and a steel door with a locking mechanism from within. Emily set Isa down, slammed the door, and twisted the bolt. Instantly, the world fell silent, as if sound itself had been sucked away, leaving only the quick, uneven breathing of two frightened souls. Izzy looked up at her, lips trembling. "Maya, where's Daddy?" Emily pulled her close, her voice breaking like glass. "He's protecting us. Sweetheart, he'll be okay." Even as she said it, she didn't know if it was a lie. They sat in the safe room, time stretching into a terrible infinity. Izzy curled into her arms, eyes wide, unblinking. Emily stroked her hair, humming an old lullaby she barely remembered, hoping the fragile melody might hold the world together just a little longer. Then the control panel crackled. A faint, broken voice came through the static. "Kus is down. There, behind the house. Mr. Moreau. Location unknown." Emily lunged for the console, twisting the dials. But the feed dissolved into static again. No contact. No answers. Only silence. Izzy clutched her hand, her eyes pleading. "Don't leave me. I'm not going anywhere," Emily whispered, pressing her forehead to the child's wooden. "I promise." The room shook. Another explosion somewhere above. The ceiling groaned. Emily covered Izzy's head, pulling her close. Seconds dragged like years. Somewhere out there, Vincent was fighting, bleeding, maybe dying to keep them safe. But he might already be gone. And if he was, then all that remained of him was here in her arms, trembling and alive. Emily held Izzy tighter, as if her embrace alone could keep the horrors of the world at bay. And in that moment, she understood no matter what happened, she would not let go. Not ever. Time inside the safe room no longer obeyed the laws of the outside world. Emily didn't know how long they'd been there. Hours. Perhaps only minutes, but each second stretched unbearably long. Thick with fear, Izzy lay curled against her, clutching Emily's jacket, her small body still trembling even in sleep. Outside, sounds came and went, gunfire, then footsteps, then shouting in a language Emily didn't understand. She couldn't tell who they were anymore, Vincent's men, or the intruders. The worst part was helplessness. She had no weapon, no training, only two shaking hands and a heart pounding so hard it hurt. But she knew one thing with absolute clarity: no one would touch Izzy, not while she was breathing. When the lights flickered, warning that backup power was failing. Emily knew time was almost gone. She checked the door again, tested the bolt. Still locked. Then she moved quietly to the cabinet in the corner and pulled it open. Inside, she found a small folding knife meant for cutting cords or emergencies. She gripped it tightly, its weight pitiful but real. She turned back, watching Izzy's sleeping face. The little girl's breathing had evened out, her hand still clutching Emily's sleeve. Emily exhaled slowly, trying to steady her own heartbeat. Then the noises faded. No more gunfire, only the faint hiss of wind through the vents. She approached the console again and pressed the button for communication. A faint, barely audible voice came through. "Emily, if you hear this, don't leave the room. There's still static." Silence. Emily closed her eyes. If Vincent had failed, if there was no one left sooner or later, they would find this room. And when that happened, she would not wait to die quietly. She looked around for anything she could use: a metal pipe, a fire extinguisher, a steel rod. She dragged them near the door, her makeshift barricade, meaningless against bullets, but symbolic of defiance. If she had to, she would fight. Not for herself, but for the child who had given her a sense of belonging she'd never known before. Then footsteps. Faint. Then louder. Steady. Someone was in the hall. Emily's blood ran cold. She held Izzy close, whispering, "We'll be fine. No one will take you from me. No one." Izzy's eyes fluttered open. "I'm scared." Emily cupped her cheek. "So am I. But I'm here. And I won't let anyone hurt you." The girl nodded faintly and buried her face against Emily's chest. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Emily rose, knife in hand, breath quick and shallow. She pressed her palm against the cold steel, ready not to open it, but to stand her ground. Whatever came next, she would face it first. Izzy would not see what the world did to the people who dared to care. In that split second, all her fear hardened into something primal, protective, absolute. She was no longer the lost student or the frightened woman. She was a mother in the making, a wild creature ready to fight the darkness itself. And when the pounding on the steel door began sharp, violent, unrelenting, Emily was ready. No doubt, no hesitation. She would fight. For Izzy, for herself, and for the man who, somewhere out there in the darkness, had trusted her with the most precious thing he had left in this world. The third pounding on the door came harder, sharper, like a heartbeat breaking free from Emily's chest. She pushed Izzy back behind the narrow bunk bed, then stood squarely before the steel door, the knife trembling in her hand with every pulse that thundered through her body. Sweat slicked her back. Her fingers ached from gripping the handle too tightly. She knew if that door gave way, there would be no second chance. A voice called from the other side, rough, hoarse, but familiar, urgent. "Emily, it's me. Adrian, open up now." For a second, she thought she was imagining it. Then Izzy's eyes lit up. "Uncle Adrian." Emily lunged for the control panel, fumbling with the lock until it released with a metallic click. The door swung open, and there he was, the quiet, stoic guard she had only ever seen as an unshakable shadow now covered in blood and dust. His coat was torn at the shoulder, his left arm crudely bandaged, but his eyes were razor clear. "Come with me," he barked. "We don't have much time." Emily didn't ask questions. She scooped Izzy into her arms and followed close behind. The back corridor of the library had been half collapsed, littered with broken tiles and smears of blood. Adrian moved ahead, pistol drawn, his pace astonishingly steady for a wounded man. He didn't waste words. Every gesture was precise, as if he'd been waiting for this exact moment his whole life. Gunfire echoed from the front of the estate as they turned down a narrow hallway toward the rear courtyard. Somewhere nearby, a grenade detonated the floor, quaked violently. Emily dropped to her knees. Clutching Izzy, Adrian spun, crouched over them, his body forming a shield. "It's all right," he shouted. "Flash round. Keep moving." Emily couldn't fathom where he found the strength. But the older man never faltered. His calm was terrifying and miraculous all at once. They reached the western garage. A black SUV waited. Engine still running. Headlights dimmed. Adrian flung open the rear door and turned to her. Voice suddenly lower. Waited. Get her inside. I'll get you both to a safe point. Emily hesitated. What about Vincent? What about the others? Vincent's holding them off upstairs. Marcus is down. We can't go back. She grabbed Adrian's sleeve. For the first time, she saw something crack behind his composure, a flicker of grief. Are you sure we'll be safe? Adrian gave a small nod. I'm not sure of anything anymore. Emily, but I know this, if you don't leave now, there won't be another chance. He knelt and looked at Izzy, brushing a strand of hair from her face with surprising gentleness. Be brave. Little one, your father taught me a lot. But you taught me fear. Fear of losing what matters most. Ija didn't answer. She only buried her face in Emily's chest. But her eyes never left Adrian's. And in that quiet moment, the man who had been Vincent Moreau's coldest right hand, the one others feared to even look at, let a single tear fall. No one spoke of it, but Emily knew. It wasn't from pain, nor exhaustion. It was the tear of a man who'd spent his life inside armor, and for the first time, allowed his heart to break open for a child who reminded him what humanity still felt like. When the SUV door slammed and the car sped into the night, Emily turned to look through the rear window. Adrian stood motionless in the courtyard, gun still in hand, eyes following them until they disappeared beyond the trees. In that gaze, she understood he had given them everything he had left, not from duty, but from love, the only pure thing left in the dark. The SUV tore down the back roads, slicing through the forest that surrounded the Moreau estate. Emily held Izzy tight against her chest, her palms still marked with the cold imprint of the knife handle, and Adrian's dried blood smeared across her sleeve. She didn't know where they were going, only that with every mile, Vincent remained behind, fighting a battle he might never return from. When the car finally stopped, they were at an old warehouse by the river, a forgotten refuge Vincent had once used as an emergency safe house. The silence was heavy, the air sharp with rust and salt. Adrian was no longer with them. Before leaving, he had said only, "Wait for the signal. If you hear nothing in 12 hours, disappear. For the child's safety." Now, inside the cold, brick-walled room under the flicker of a single yellow light, Emily sat motionless beside Izzy, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep. The phone in Emily's hand buzzed once. Not Vincent. Lauren Price. A short message. If you have information, this is the time to use it. The door will open for you and the girl. Just confirm. Emily read it again and again. Her chest tightened until she could barely breathe. The choice before her was cruelly clear. If she said yes, the police would come. She and Izzy would walk free away from the blood. The lies. The danger. They could start over. Live a life that was safe. Respectably. Right. But Vincent, the man who had trusted her with his child, who had fought through the fire to protect her, would be dragged into a cell. Or worse, die in the siege that her message had unleashed. She could save herself and the girl, but she would destroy the man who had chosen to believe in her. She didn't know where he was, or if he was even alive. If she turned back, she might lead Izzy straight into another nightmare. Emily stood and stepped outside. The night wind struck her face, cold and raw, clearing her thoughts. In her pocket, the emergency phone Vincent had given her still lay there. She powered it on no signal. Then she saw it. A flicker of light from the edge of the forest. 3 short flashes. Too long. Her breath caught. Alive. Coming. Tears welled before she could stop them. Vincent was alive, and he was on his way. But Lauren already knew. Another message appeared on the screen. You have 30 minutes. After that, I'll assume your silence is your answer. There won't be another chance. Emily turned back to the small cot where Izzy slept, her lashes resting against her cheeks, her face peaceful amid the chaos. Within that tiny sleeping form was a future unwritten, a blank page in the blood-stained book of Vincent's world. Emily looked down at her phone. 2 paths. 1, betray Vincent. Secure safety for herself and Izzy. Build a new life, upon silence and guilt. 2, refuse. Wait for him, and cling to the fragile hope that he might still lead them out of this storm. And in that suspended moment, she realized that sacrifice isn't always death. Sometimes, it is the act of living with a choice you can never confess, a truth you can never explain. Emily deleted the message, powered off the phone. She didn't choose Lauren. She chose Vincent. But more than that, she chose Izzy, not so the girl would forget, but so she would remember. Remember that on the darkest night, someone had stood between life and betrayal, and chosen what was right, even if it meant losing everything. Dawn was just breaking when Emily heard the sound of a car stopping outside the warehouse. Her heart began to pound, unsure whether it was the enemy or Vincent, but when the old metal door creaked open, it was him. Vincent Moreau, the man she thought she might never see again, stood framed in the pale morning light. Thinner than before, his shirt stained with dried blood, his face marked by bruises and deep cuts. Yet his eyes were unchanged, dark, quiet, and so full of warmth that Emily couldn't hold back her tears. He looked at her, then at Izzy, who sat huddled in the corner. In an instant, he crossed the room, dropped to his knees, and wrapped his daughter in his arms. Izzy burst into sobs, her small shoulders trembling. "I thought you were gone." "Daddy." Vincent only held her tighter, his lips pressed shut, unable to speak. Emily stood frozen, the world slowing around her. A minute passed before Vincent lifted his head. Their eyes met, and Emily knew it was time to say what neither of them wanted to say. "You're hurt. You can't go any farther." Vincent nodded slightly, resting his hand on Izzy's hair for a long, lingering moment. "The police are coming," he said softly. "I know. Someone tipped them off." Emily clenched her fists. "It wasn't me." Vincent gave a faint smile, one that carried both pain and tenderness. "I know. If it had been you, they would have arrived before I did." He straightened, stepped closer to her. "You made your choice, and I know it was the hardest one you'll ever make." Emily's throat tightened. "Then come with us." "Together?" Vincent shook his head slowly, firmly. "I can't. They won't stop hunting us. But if I stay, if I take the blame for everything, they'll stop. You and Izzy will have a chance to live in peace." She moved toward him, her voice breaking. "No, you fought for so long. You deserve a second chance. You've done everything for Izzy." Vincent's eyes held her steady, calm, impossibly deep. "Emily, I've lived too long in darkness. You're the first light I've seen in years. I won't drag you into my shadow any longer. And Izzy, she deserves a life untouched by my ghosts." He reached into the small leather pouch at his side and handed her a worn envelope. "Inside are the documents, safe accounts, new identities. You can take her anywhere. No one will find you." Emily took it, her hands trembling, and Vincent turned back to his daughter, his gaze softening. "I'll do what must be done. I'll surrender. Sign every confession. As long as they let you both walk away." He knelt again, kissed Izzy's forehead. "Be good. My love, listen to Emily. And remember your father loves you. Even when he can't be there." Izzy clung to him, refusing to let go. "Where are you going?" "You'll come back. Won't you?" Vincent held her close, his voice hoarse. "One day, when you're old enough, you'll understand why I had to go. But my love for you, it will never leave." When he finally loosened his embrace, Emily stepped forward to take Izzy into her arms. She and Vincent shared one last look in the dim morning light. No words, no promises, just a gaze filled with everything they couldn't say. Then Vincent turned and walked out of the warehouse, his steps slow but resolute. From outside, the distant whir of helicopters began to rise. When the door closed, Emily pressed Izzy to her chest. She knew they had lost something immense, but had also been given something even greater, a chance to truly live. And Vincent Moreau, the man once feared by an entire city, had chosen to become a father, not through power or fear, but through the light of sacrifice. 6 months later, spring arrived in a small lakeside town in northern Oregon, a place where no one knew the name Vincent Moreau, and no one had ever heard the story of a crime lord now locked away in a silent, gray cell. Here, there was only a young woman named Maya and her little adopted daughter, Isabel, who had moved in a few months earlier. They lived in a white wooden house with a green tiled roof and a tiny sunflower garden that was just beginning to bloom beneath the sun. Emily now, Maya Bennett, lived under the new identity Vincent had arranged in that envelope. Izzy attended a nearby elementary school, quickly becoming the kind of child teachers adored and classmates gravitated toward. Polite, bright, with eyes so large and gentle, they made people instinctively want to protect her. Their days were simple miracles, quiet mornings with toast and almond milk, golden afternoons when Maya walked Izzy home beneath trees turning red and gold, peaceful evenings by the fireplace reading together as Izzy whispered, "Miss Maya, I got a good behavior sticker today." Every small moment felt sacred to Emily, a woman who once thought survival was all she could hope for. Never happiness. She worked part-time at a small second-hand bookstore, owned by a kind, elderly lady who never asked too many questions. Emily cherished everything: the scent of old paper, the soft chime of the wind bells outside, Izzy's laughter when she fell in the grass without anyone scolding her. Yet behind the peace lingered a quiet ache. Each night, after Izzy had fallen asleep, Emily sat alone on the porch, staring into the distance as if her gaze could reach the place where Vincent was. She imagined him there, in some cold prison, perhaps reading a newspaper or staring at the ceiling, utterly alone. He had never written. No letter. No message. No sign. Perhaps he wasn't allowed. Perhaps he wanted them to be free. But Emily believed he was alive, and she kept her promise to care for Izzy with all her heart, to fill her days with light instead of shadows. Each night, she told the girl gentle stories. No darkness. No mafia. No guns, only princesses, pina forests, and talking kittens. One evening, Izzy asked softly, "Miss Maya, do you think Daddy still remembers us?" Emily pulled her close. "Of course he does. He'll never forget." And inside, she repeated the words like a prayer. Vincent might have lost his freedom, but he had kept the greatest promise of all. He had given his daughter peace. And to Emily, he had given not only a responsibility, but redemption itself, the truest, quietest form of love she had ever known. On a cool morning in April, while Emily was washing dishes and Izzy played by the lake, a plain beige envelope appeared in the mailbox. No name, no address. Inside was a pencil sketch, simple, but heavy with meaning. A tall man holding a small bracelet, a little girl running toward him. No words, no signature, but Emily knew. It was a message. No need for names. No need for letters. Just a signal, a silent proof that somewhere out there, he was still watching over them. Emily smiled, tears spilling quietly down her cheeks. Because sometimes, love doesn't need to speak. It just needs to live and keep holding on. Quietly, within the heart. The first time Emily took Izzy to visit the federal penitentiary in Colorado was on a mild summer day, when the sky was a flawless stretch of blue and the dry wind carried the faint scent of wild grass burning somewhere far across the fields. Izzy wore her favorite sky blue dress, her hair neatly braided on both sides, and in her small hands, she held a crayon drawing a little house with a red roof, and inside it, a tall man standing beside a smiling woman with long hair and a child between them. While they waited in the visiting room, Emily could feel her heart beating faster than she could control, not from fear, but from a wave of emotion she could hardly name: anticipation, guilt, tenderness. She had never turned her back on Vincent, but 6 months of separation had carved a quiet ache into her chest. Now, as she sat beside her daughter, she wasn't sure if she would be able to stay composed. The steel door opened. Vincent entered in a gray prison uniform, his frame thinner, his hair streaked more with gray, rough and uneven, yet his eyes were still the same deep, calm, and warm enough to feel like an embrace. Izzy leapt up before Emily could react. "Daddy." The sound of that single word broke the silence like light through glass. Vincent dropped to his knees, arms open, catching the little girl as she ran to him. He held her as if she were something fragile he'd dreamed of touching for years. His eyes closed. His breath trembled against her hair. "I think of you every single day." "Izzy." Emily stood still for a long moment before walking toward them. When Vincent lifted his gaze, their eyes met, and in that look lay a thank you that needed no words. They didn't hug. They didn't cry. They simply sat down, side by side. Three ordinary people, in an extraordinary moment of stillness. In the white room filled with echoes of other voices, Vincent began telling Izzy stories he had never told before. The day he secretly built her first kite when she was still learning to walk. The nights he stayed awake just to watch her sleep and wished he could be a better father. Izzy never asked about prison, or guilt, or the half-heard whispers she must have caught in the months they'd been apart. She only asked, "Daddy, do you remember when we slept in the cold storage room?" Vincent laughed. A tired, raspy laugh, but one that was completely genuine. "I do, every second of it, and I remember the look in a young woman's eyes, someone who didn't run when she saw me. Even though I must have looked like a monster." Emily's lips curved slightly. "I didn't see a monster. I saw a father who'd lost his way." They stayed like that for an hour talking, smiling, sitting quietly in between. And when it was time to say goodbye, Izzy clung to her father's hand, her eyes filled with the fear of losing him again. "Don't go away this time. Promise." Vincent bent down, his rough hands cupping her small fingers. "I'm not going anywhere. Sweetheart, I just have to pay for what I've done. But every night, when you look up at the stars, you'll see one shining bright. That's my message to you. That I love you. That I'm always with you." Izzy pressed her lips together and nodded. Then, from her pocket, she pulled out the drawing she'd made. "This is for you, so you won't forget us." Vincent took it, his hands trembling. He touched the paper as if it were the most precious thing he had ever held. When the guard signaled the end of visiting hours, Emily and Vincent exchanged one final look. No words, no tears, just a silent promise. They were still a family, not perfect, but unbreakable. From that day on, Emily brought Izzy every month. Their short meetings inside those white walls became the fragile thread that kept them bound together through a world that had tried to tear them apart. And for Izzy, the father she once believed gone forever came back to life through handshakes, stories, and the quiet faith that one day they would be together again under an open sky. 3 years after that first reunion, on a gentle autumn afternoon, when the trees along the lake road in Oregon had turned to gold, Emily sat on the porch, watching Izzy play with the neighborhood children. The little girl was 10, now taller, stronger, and with a smile that warmed anyone who saw it. In Emily's lap lay a letter, its handwriting firm and familiar. It was from Vincent. He wrote that he was doing well in the rehabilitation program, that he might be considered for early parole. There were no promises, only a few steady lines saying he followed Izzy's growth through her drawings and letters every month, and that he was grateful Emily had never walked away. The letter eased something deep inside her. She knew that even though they didn't share a life like other families did, they had found one another, held on, and loved each other in the truest way possible. Family, she thought, doesn't always mean blood, or dinners around the same table. Family is where a child feels safe. It's when an ordinary woman chooses to give up everything so a little girl can grow up surrounded by love. It's a father who decides to pay for his past so his daughter can have a future. Through their story, we come to see that destiny doesn't always lead us to perfection, but sometimes it offers us a chance to do what is right. And when we choose with love and compassion, even the deepest wounds can become our brightest light. Dear friends, if you've listened this far, perhaps you've already felt what this story wanted to share. So tell us, what do you believe truly makes a family? Have you ever known someone who wasn't bound to you by blood, but still became your place of belonging? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, your honest feelings. Straight from the heart. If this story touched you in any way, please subscribe and share this video with others. Underworld Love Stories will continue bringing you tales that reach the deepest corners of the human soul. And as always, may you and your loved ones stay healthy, joyful, and peaceful in every moment of life. Thank you for spending your precious time with us. Goodbye for now, and see you in the next story.